Okay, folks, I'm going to start in a minute. Um, just, this is just me doing an impromptu piece. So the only agenda here is to explain what is happening with the RBI's circular, the recent circular that's just come out, where it talks about how they're freeing the rupee in a way that they haven't done before. Uh, Now, here is the background. Perhaps I'm recording this space, so I go a little bit fast. Allow, please feel free to stop me. I'll take in requests in a bit. I will just go with it right now. So, okay. So here's where I'm just inviting Nihit to co-host so that we can coordinate. So here's the history of what's happened. Um, Typically when you import or export, you denominate your exports in US dollars. How this works is that your bank has, let's say HDFC Bank has an account. It's called a Vostro account inside of a US bank. Let's call it, Chase, JP Morgan Chase or something like that. So it has an account there. When you want to import from a US company, you typically tell your bank, HDFC Bank, take my INR, convert it to USD, and pay this person in the US. So what HDFC Bank does is it takes your INR, say it takes 1 crore INR, and correspondingly gives you tells you effectively that roughly 120,000 USD will be transferred. Now, what it does, it has some balance sitting in its US account, which is its Vostro account in the JP Morgan Chase. It tells JP Morgan Chase, yeah, listen, Deepak has done some drama. Uh, Please pay this person. This is some person in California. Please pay him $120,000 out of from my Vostro to that person's account. This is how the international trade works. This is great if it's India to the US, but USD is also used as a international trade currency. So you typically will say, listen, one second. I will say this a bit more audible. Okay, so the next, what happens is, let's say you're trading with Russia, and you need to pay the Russian company some money. The Russian company works with the Russian bank, and you work with HDFC Bank. Both the Indian, that's the HDFC Bank and the Russian bank, has Vostro account with some US bank or the other. One may have with JP Morgan, one may have with something else. Um, Basically, they each instruct their US counterpart correspondent banks to say that, HDFC Bank says, JP Morgan, please transfer so much money to this other bank, to the Russian bank's Vostro account, which would be another US bank. Both banks are located in the US. Now, what happens is, if you trade with Russia, the US banks get to know. US banks know all the trade anywhere in the world that is denominated in USD because it passes through. The US gets to know. There are certain rules and regulations every US trade. So, for instance, you can't trade with Iran in USD because Iran is not allowed to hold an account in USD, and they will sanction you if you try to do this, even surreptitiously. So, the way that this has happened is because US is a trade currency, everybody likes. Now, you can also do this with euro, you can also do this with Japanese yen, but what happens in euro is you have to have a correspondent account with the US bank. Your bank in India will have a correspondent account with the US Vostro account in a European bank, and they can trade in euro with whoever wants to be in Europe, because whoever has an account in Europe can trade in Europe. Whoever has an account in Japan has trades in the Japanese yen and so on. So the international currencies, India has never allowed this thing to happen because India said, "बहुत तुम trade करो, export करो, please get dollars or some foreign currency. We want to own foreign currency reserves. We don't think the Indian rupee should be used." This is short-sighted, but it was done earlier because we didn't have any foreign currency, and of course nobody wanted the rupee in the first place. Now over time, we've gotten better at this, And we are now in a situation where we need to trade with Russia. We can't pay them because we can't pay them in euros, and we can't pay them in USD, because USD payments and European payments cannot be made to any Russian bank other than Gazprom. We can't do that at all. But you cannot make those payments because there's the European and American sanctions have applied, and they said you can't pay. Now this is the problem for Russian people who are saying, because I'll give you your crude or whatever you want from me, but you got to pay me in somehow. Uh, the earlier funda was to pay in rubles, so India had to find rubles somewhere and then pay for it. You can get rubles by borrowing temporarily rubles from the Russian central bank, can borrow, can lend you rubles temporarily. But then, if Russia is always going to be a net exporter to India, it doesn't make sense for this trade to be denominated between India and Russia, to be denominated in rubles, because we'll have to keep borrowing rubles for them to pay them. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Uh, this, I think, one of the key things that happens in a trading format, I'm very vastly oversimplifying it, is that if two countries trade, one is a net exporter, one is a net importer. The importer provides the currency, the exporter provides the goods or services, right? So that means I'll give you, I don't know, 100 tons of crude oil, you give me your currency. If I can't tell you to give me my currency, because how will you get my currency if I'm a net exporter? So I will take your currency. So typically, the US has been the world's reserve currency because the US consumes and the world kind of lends to them. I mean, uses their currency. But they violated this by saying they froze Russia's accounts. No, you can't freeze someone's account. It's just like basically the world's most terrible thing to do is, let's say, for instance, banking with HDFC. And we've had these problems, right? HDFC net banking doesn't work. Now you suddenly feel poor because you have money but you can't use it. Because it does, net banking doesn't work. Nothing works. So what do? So you therefore go and get your get other banks. छोड़ तो चलेगा times, and you put half your money in one bank, half your money in another bank, hoping that both the banks will. For Russia, because it was using USD and Euro, it had like $400 billion or $500 billion in currencies like Euro and USD, and they blocked their access to that money. That means Russia has the money, but they can't use it anymore. So technically, Russia is poor for that time. So Russia retaliated, said, "I won't give you gas." So then Germany said, "No, no, please, you have to give me gas." So Russia said, "Okay, you pay me in rubles." They said, "Where will I get rubles?" I don't know. Find rubles and pay, because if you pay me in euro, then I can't use the euro because you have blocked my account. So I won't take you. So they have now made an arrangement where Gazprom Bank pays them, will take euros, but Gazprom Bank is not sanctioned, because if they sanction, Russia will stop the gas. All sorts of drama. These are all temporary arrangements, because in between Europe and America, we don't. I mean, Europe and Russia, we don't really figure out like industry. What India has done, and India should have done this long back, is to give in to certain demands here, saying Russia said, "Listen, we can trade in Europe." Earlier, the trade in rupee was done very surreptitiously with Iran, very temporarily. RBI said Indian banks can be correspondent banks. So that means a Russian bank can open accounts to account in an Indian bank. Iranian bank, Iran has also said that they want to do everything in the rupee, not in the dollar. So Iranian bank can open a escrow account in an Indian bank, says SBI. And in that account, they can hold rupees. So whenever a person exports to Russia, he can say, "Take my rupees and give it to the Russian bank's escrow account in rupees itself." The Russian bank's escrow account will be credited with rupees. So Russian bank owns, let us say, 10 crore rupees. See, let's say 10 crore rupees. Uh, who do you export it to? Let's say you're exporting it to a person in Russia. That person will obviously not do anything with INR, rubles. So the Russian bank will say, "Listen, in my account in India, there is 10 crore rupees, which is equal to 5 crore rubles. So I will give 5 crore rubles to this person in Russia in his account. So now the Russian bank owns 5 crore, 10 crore rupees in its account. And its own balance sheet keeps right that okay, in my assets I have 5, um, I have 10 crore rupees, and because my balance sheet is denominated in rubles, it's actually my account. It will convert that on every, let us say, end of the quarter to appropriate rubles. If it is 2 rupees ruble today, it will be 10 crore rupees will be equal to 10 crore rupees will be equal to 5 crore rupees. If that becomes 1 rupee 50 paisa, then the same 10 crore rupees, because the number of rupees has not changed, becomes 6 point something crore. So the the idea over here is that the Russian bank owns INR in India. INR of course never thinks it can't. Just Indian, it's just an electronic thing that stays in India. The two ways that the Russian bank can do something with the INR is if the Russian import wants to import goods from India, the Russian importer can pay the Russian bank in rubles. Russian bank can tell the Indian bank where it has a boss to SBI. Boss, somebody has imported from Dr. Reddy's. Can you please pay Dr. Reddy's equivalent rupees from my Vostro account to the Dr. Reddy's account? So Dr. Reddy's actually earns in rupees, not in rubles. It will of course be counted as exports, but just gets credit to Dr. Reddy's in rupees. It's fair because Dr. Reddy's has to pay salaries in rupees. It has to pay its rent in rupees. So it doesn't make sense for it to have rubles or any other, for any other currency. It's fine to just have to convert them back. So here, the conversion step is good. The other thing that the Russian bank can do, and this is how America finances itself, is that the Russian bank, with its extra INR, it is importing less. Russia imports less than it exports. Net net there will be a positive INR balance. That positive INR balance can be used. They say you can't just put it on a account with 0% interest. Please make it get some interest. So it will invest that money, say treasury bills, government securities, or something safe.
Hi Deepak.
The safest thing to invest in the rupee is government bills, government T-bills. Currently, RBI has only allowed foreign investment
Hi Deepak, Nate here. Can you hear me?
which are short-term instruments. Only up till October, I think, 2022. They'll have to change that rule if they really think this new circular has to take effect. They'll have to make it permanent because nobody is going to say, I'll invest in 10-year bonds. Nonsense. And people in the foreign banks and governments will be like, boss, I want very short term, 3 month paper, 1 month paper. उससे ज़्यादा कोई guarantee है जिसके बिना कुछ भी कर लो, but I will buy the short term. India also buys when it has Indian banks, reserve banks, it has foreign reserves. They sit in the US and they buy short term US securities. Now, where we are, and I'll stop here, perhaps with some questions, is this rule is going to allow facilitate trade between India and another country bilaterally. What it doesn't do is allow India to become a real international trade currency. Russia cannot say that it wants to buy something from Iran and will pay Iran in Indian rupees, because that would mean that the Indian bank can be instructed to transfer money from the Russian escrow account in to the Iranian bank's escrow account. I think that's currently not allowed. At least it's not there in the rules. You can currently only facilitate trade. You can't facilitate inter-country things between different nations. One party has to be Indian. I think they have to change that rule. Otherwise, it will never be a true international currency in the first place. Um, Another problem that we don't know yet is whether the international bank, a Russian bank, can say, listen, I have INR, can I convert it to yuan renminbi in China? Because the Indian bank, say SBI, may have a correspondent account in a Vostro account in a Chinese bank. So you take my INR here in India and give me yuan renminbi in the Chinese bank so that I can cross convert the two. This part also is not clear whether it is allowed. It needs to be allowed. But that's how, freedom is what makes trade happen. You can't keep all these. Oh, you can only do it for trade. You can only do it to with an Indian party and all that. But at least it's a start. This is my reading of this circular. I think it's a game changer. I've been talking about this for 10 years, and finally they've done something. I am so frustrated to be making it. कुछ तो किया मतलब. But finally, with our backs to the wall, the rupee is hitting 80. It should have hit 80 a long time ago. RBI has been very nicely managing the rupee volatility. So credit to them for it. But I think the only way to truly get long-term security in the rupee and long-term flows stabilized, and for India to actually feature as an international player, as a net importer, the only net importer in the BRIC, is for the rupee to be internationalized. And this is a good start. Okay. We should open up to questions. Please raise. Sorry, yes.
Yeah. Hi, Deepak. Can you hear me? Nihit here. Deepak, can you hear me? And Nihit this side. Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Deepak. You need to set your mic something differently because we were getting very bad audio.
Oh God!
So
Sorry,
if you
sorry,
can,
sorry. I think I moved the audio. I'm so sorry. I haven't talked so much, and we've not really. Oh God!
yeah. So yeah, yeah, we'll just say sorry to the audience because you lost a lot of what Deepak was saying. So Deepak, maybe you could summarize it
Arre,
again
yeah, yeah. I
and
think let me.
there are like four
Oh,
four fifty.
damn!
There are
I
four
think the
fifty
whole thing.
people. There are 450 people sticking on just because they want to hear you. So please summarize again and
Yeah, I'll
use
start it
proper
again. I'll
audio.
start it again.
Yep.
Okay, okay,
Sure.
properly,
Sure. Sure.
properly,
Sure.
more properly right now.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
so go back to the drawing table. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize there was some drama with I've just changed my phone, so some weird thing. Anyway, so okay, coming back to the summary, RBI has just freed the rupee in a small way. They have allowed the internationalization of the rupee in the sense that trade flows can be settled in the rupee. All this sounds very good, but right now, let me just quickly summarize what's currently happened. If you trade with someone in US dollar, which is um, if I'm buying something from Amazon in the US, I have to tell my bank, which is say HDFC Bank, to pay Amazon. Now, how does HDFC Bank pay Amazon? HDFC Bank has a correspondent account. It's called a Vostro account inside some bank in the US, let's say JP Morgan. And for the sake of simplicity, let's say JP Morgan is also where Amazon is banking itself. Now, Amazon has an account there, HDFC Bank has an account there. Both these accounts are denominated in USD. What happens here is that I tell my bank, listen, pay $100,000 to Amazon. HDFC Bank says, "Acha, theek hai, but you have to give me 80 lakh rupees because 80 rupees exchange rate and with their fees and all that drama, which is why HDFC Bank makes so much money." But they take the 80 lakhs from say my account and then gives $100,000. How does it give that? It says, well, JP Morgan Chase, it calls JP Morgan Chase up. Actually, it sends a swift message, but just to give you the indication, it calls JP Morgan Chase up and says, मेरे अकाउंट में $100,000 है, उसको निकाल के प्लीज अमेजोन के अकाउंट में डाल दो in appropriate language, right? So you move. So HDFC's USD account inside of JP Morgan Chase is debited and Amazon's account is credited with USD. This is how international trade happens currently. This also happens if the USD trade is done between two people who are not even in the US. So India is trading with Russia. India wants to buy, say, I don't know, diamonds from Russia. If it wants to buy those diamonds from Russia, the Russian diamond exporter has a Russian bank. Indian diamond importer has an Indian bank. Both these banks have Vostro accounts in some US banks. Let's assume again, for the sake of simplicity, both of them have it with the same JP Morgan Chase Bank in New York. Both of those, so the Indian importer pays the Indian bank in rupees. Indian Bank tells its Vostro account tells JP Morgan Chase to debit its Vostro account, transfer money to the Russian bank's Vostro account in JP Morgan Chase US itself. Therefore, the US and then the Russian bank pays appropriate rubles to the Russian Russian importer, rather Russian exporter. So the dollars remain in the JP Morgan Chase accounts in New York. They never leave there, but that's the idea. USD can only be traded inside the US. It always remains in the US. INR remains in INR. Russia rubles remain in Russia. Now, what happens with this is that the situation would generally work fine, except for now, where they have frozen the USD accounts of Russian banks, the Vostro accounts inside the US, almost all except for Gazprom. We'll come to that later. But the Russian accounts being frozen means that India can't pay for anything in USD or Europe also, because Europe also has such sanctions, to any Russian exporter. And similarly, a Russian importer can't use, or Russian bank cannot use its accounts to pay for any imports by Russia from a US or Europe, European counterparty. This is a problem because at some level, it's like you having um, you know, if say HDFC Bank's net banking doesn't work and you have a lot of money in HDFC, it's only in HDFC Bank. What do you do then? Because if the net banking doesn't work, you may have all this money, but you can't use it. And if they continuously keep throwing errors, you can never use that money, right? So you feel miserable and you feel poor, and then you go and say, "कि इसको तो कुछ hedge करना है यार." Yeah, go and open an account with ICICI Bank, put half your money in one bank, half you put in another bank. So you hope that both of them don't go down at the same time, and definitely not purposely. So here, purposefully, Russia's money has been blocked by US and Europe, so they can't trade. And now, obviously, they are looking for other currencies to trade with, and they've already been trading with China in the yuan. India, US, Europe, yuan bhi karenge, and then we're fighting some war with them and all that. It's a fight. The second one is that India is a net importer on trade for the most part. So therefore, we should, if you take two countries and one is an exporter and one is an importer, the country that exports provides the goods, country that imports should provide the currency in general. This is overly simplistic, but in general, that's the thing. See, India being a net importer, the rupee should be used. It's the only net importer in the BRIC. So it makes sense for the rupee to be more international in nature. However, India is not very um, popular in the international circles, whether it is for lots of reasons. We have arbitrarily set rules, all sorts of things. So it takes time to build that up, but I think it's a good first step to say we've international. What has changed? Now, a Russian bank can create an account inside an Indian bank called a Vostro account. Then, any Russian importer or exporter, let's say is an exporter exporting diamonds to India, he can tell his bank that he wants to receive rubles from India, but the trade is denominated in rupees. So the Indian counterpart, that is, let us say some diamond company, says, "Listen, dear HDFC Bank, please transfer, I don't know, 10 lakh rupees to this particular Vostro account of the Russian bank in HDFC Bank itself." So let's say the Russian bank has a Vostro account in HDFC Bank. You will then immediately uh, see HDFC Bank transferring to the Russian Vostro. A Russian bank now owns 10 lakh rupees in HDFC Bank, and it says, well, for this 10 lakh rupee account, because the ruble exchange rate is 2 rupees to 1 ruble, I'll give 5 lakh rubles or 500,000 rubles to the diamond exporter in Russia. This happens inside Russia, not related to us. But the Russian bank then continues to have that his account in India populated with 10 lakh rupees. What can it do with that money? It can use it to do the other side of the trade. So this is, let's say, the Russian importer that wants to import medicines from Dr. Reddy's. The import can be facilitated in the reverse direction. The Russian importer pays rubles to the Russian bank. Russian bank converts to, in a calculator, just says, okay, you've given me 10 lakh rubles. That's equal to 20 lakh rupees. So I'll take 20 lakh rupees from my account in India and pay Dr. Reddy's in India. So Dr. Reddy's gets the Indian rupee uh, number in its account, which is fine because Dr. Reddy's anyway has to pay salaries and rent in rupees. Having said all of this, I think it's a good first step that the RBI is doing this. This will facilitate trade. What it hasn't said or hasn't allowed yet is whether okay. So one extra thing over here is, what does the Russian bank do with that excess rupees that sits in the uh, ruble? I mean, in its Indian bank. It can't leave it as a current account because that will earn zero interest. So instead, what it'll do is it'll invest in the safest possible rupee investments. Safest possible rupee investment right now is the Indian government bonds or treasury bills, which means that the foreign banks, whoever created correspondent accounts with India, they will use their excess rupee balances to buy very short term and safe rupee securities. The problem right now is the RBI is only allowing them to buy short term securities only till October. That means right now it's opened it up. 2 3 days ago, it opened it up, but it opened it up only till October. This has to be made permanent because nobody's going to set up accounts here if they have to invest in 10-year bonds, which is the earlier funda was minimum 3 years left to maturity and all that stuff. Um, that residual maturity clause has to be removed forever if this scheme has to succeed. Second one is that if Russian banks then therefore do invest in Indian rupee securities, that the yields of Indian government bonds should come down because technically demand has increased, supply remains roughly the same. So effectively, Russia could finance Indian government in a way, and this is how India has been financing U.S. government and European finance our government. But the last bits is that two other things that have to be done, according to me, is to allow two different countries, that expressed the desire to use the rupee as a currency to trade with India, to use their rupee balances to trade with each other also. So Iran wants to buy something from Russia, it should be able to use its rupee account in India to pay the Russia corresponding rupee account in India and just trade using the rupee instead. So this is something that they haven't yet allowed. The last bit they haven't allowed yet is whether a Russian bank, which has a correspondent bank, can use the Indian rupee to pay for a forex transaction instead of for trade flows. Forex transaction being, tell the Indian bank, take my rupees, which are in my account, and instead give me yuan renminbi. The Indian bank will have a Chinese Vostro account, Russian bank will have a Chinese Vostro account. Those two can exchange between each other. So, is that possible? I think the current circular doesn't say anything about it. I don't think it's allowed right now. It's only talking about trade flows, but I think that is also necessary. Good first step, but we need the subsequent steps also if the rupee is to be internationalized. And as I said, I really think the rupee needs to be internationalized because it's one of those times when we have our backs to the wall. The 79 80 rupees trade exchange rate is not going to sustain really unless we do something. This will ease some pressure off of the rupee to buy USD. It will also allow more trade with countries which don't want to trade in the dollar, and it will diversify our trade flows as well. So I'll leave that here and let's get questions on.
Great. Thanks for the intro, Deepak. So, very quick question before we take on requests and I open it up to the audience. So, is RBI and is India among the very first few who have started denominating trades in their own currency, or there are other currencies already that are doing it? So are we ahead of the curve, or are we just
Sorry,
catching
man,
up
I
to the
lost
world?
you. Sorry, buddy, I lost you there. Could you say that again?
Hello, Deepak, you're on mute.
Apologies. I said I lost you there.
Okay,
Apologies. Did you
I'll
say? Can you repeat that?
yeah, I'll repeat. Yeah. So the question was, before we open up to the audience. So my quick question was that now RBI is dominating all the trades in INR. It has allowed it. So are we ahead of the curve, or are there other countries who have already done these things and we are just catching up?
I think every country has done it except for India. I think in the BRIC, we are the only country that doesn't allow this till now. We are also possibly the only country. Well, I think a lot of other countries had internationalized flows much earlier. But it is that uh, so for instance, you could trade in the JPY, you could trade in British pound, you can trade in euro, you can trade in a lot of other currencies as well bilaterally. Usually this was done by some complex swap mechanism. uh, so you did, sometimes India would have like a Japanese yen, or even the Sri Lankan rupee. I think there was a swap mechanism to be done, but this is a much better system because it allows trade flows to be international and sets up the route for people to be able to use the rupee to trade with each other as well, not just bilaterally.
Okay. So I'll now request Sushil Kedia to join in.
Deepak, one can always trust anything important that happens at the economic monetary policy level. You will, with utmost alacrity, set up a very useful, productive space. So thanks a lot for keeping this yeomanship for everyone around. And briefly, much more to be absorbed from so many other learned minds here. Maybe I'll step back in again with a more detailed thing in a little later rounds if there are any. But broad first feelers that come to head and mind, head and heart, from a trader's perspective first. See, until we were not allowed to denominate any trades in our currency, the first basic cost that was working against our advantage, against us, was bid ask spread. If we are forced to trade in any other currency, only our physical goods and services, the bid ask spread is always against us, whether we are exporters or importers. So, over a time, assuming indeed a growing fraction of India's global trade in goods and services will keep shifting into rupees. So, for whatever quantum that shifts to rupees, and whoever agrees to denominate export import contracts with Indian entities in rupees will be now at the other end, they will be hitting us on the bid or ask. And that bid ask spread, the market bid, that basic bare minimum cost of trading. And because of the shifting bid ask, even the slippage. So, an accounting estimate for individual business estimate entities, how much they are gaining or losing, is not truly feasible. But at a broad economy level, there is every hair of cost shifted to you improves your competitiveness. So that's one thing. But nothing comes for free. So these are very initial reactions from me. I haven't had a chance to really study or think much about it. I saw your space, I checked the news, and I grabbed in. The second thing is, since it is my personal belief, I can be completely wrong, but this is what my belief is, and I speak from my belief. Nothing will come for free. There's a hidden cost of something anywhere. So the bid and ask cost that we are shifting to anybody who agrees to deal with us in rupees. Maybe Bangladesh will initially do that, Bhutan will do, Nepal will do, Maldives will do, and increasingly then maybe the threat perception of those who are controlling the entire global cash matrix. During the Russian war, the risk was on Russia that the Russian contracts will not get honored. And this Nostro Vostro is basically another name for debit and credit. It is the same bank account. An American bank holding in its ledger the account of an Indian bank or a Russian bank, and India or Russia to trade. So the American bank unnecessarily वो सबका ताऊ बना हुआ बैठा था. रूबल डॉलर का एक हेज होगा, रूपी डॉलर का एक हेज होगा और रूबल का हेज होगा. तो अब्दुल्ले की शादी में बेगाना दीवाना सबको, the whole world was unnecessarily, that financial clout. So if same thing like, if Visa, Mastercard were the only payment mechanisms, and now we have had RuPay and so many of our own UPI mechanisms, and now India is trying to install UPI mechanisms in other friendly countries. So apart from this transactional cost, which I'll come back to again, there are a few more elements of it. The big geopolitical factor that, tomorrow, if out of any trade embargoes, any geopolitical inclinations, the amount of threats that governments have to plan for, the arm twisting that governments have to plan for. So on a strategic level, on a 5, 10, 15, 20-year perspective, while India indeed is trying to express its courage that it is not going to be questioned. But Iran tried doing that. We will deal in another currency, will not deal in dollars. Bombing kar diya. So it is not something that is going to be, you know, let me put it in vernacular. गांव का बनिया, गांव का साहूकार सेठ जो सबको ब्याज पे पैसा देता था और सबका यूनिवर्सल सेटलर था, अभी उसको छोड़ के अगर आप काम करने की कोशिश भी शुरू करोगे तो आपने तो उसकी मूछ के बाल कुरकुरे कर दिए. So that geopolitical strain or stress is the first visible cost of gaining that bid and ask. Now apart from the bid and ask, if increasingly these trades will get more popular, so even the cost of hedging, because it's all in OTC market, the CFD market is not where the true exporters importers really work on their hedges. The CFD market is much more for the speculators. So while that is also having a significantly larger volume than our NSE futures, where again most of the time it's speculators, but the interbank market, and then the counterparty relationships in global markets, where the Indian business entity was soliciting what's the hedge available on what horizon. So increasingly over time, when hedges are sought on rupee, so it's clearly a doorway opened for establishing a much larger stature of the rupee in pure economic terms, and in political terms it is going to be seen clearly, because it is indeed a desire to also say we don't want to be so dependent on the dollar, which has become the global hegemony. and
Yeah,
and I
I
think
agree. I
that's going
agree.
to add to the global ongoing stress. So India, Russia axis, and
So,
along with that
Sushil,
others. Maybe I'll.
if I may summarize, because I think otherwise this call will go on for 2 hours. We'll. I think what you're right is that there's going to be some kind of a reaction from the US, which I think agreeable. And of course, if you use it for ruble trade, they will be jumping up and down. But also, of course, this reduces hedging costs for an Indian entity, because you can plan your costs in rupees and don't have to deal with. And especially the importers, I suppose, because otherwise things go crazy. I think that
So to
these are the
wrap
2
it up,
points you mentioned.
Deepak, in another 3 lines, more than just the visible financial cost, which will accrue very slowly over time as the world very slowly shifts towards it, is a much larger upfront geopolitical stress cost that we have chosen to agree upon today. So while it's something beautiful for all of us as Indians, as proud Indians, or as productive businesses in the future, um, there may be other collateral costs, and let's wait and watch as things develop. But over the long run, if we can pull this off, it is definitely going to scale up by many orbits our global trading stature.
Yep, I agree. Thanks, Sushil. That's that's a good input. I think one quick note over here is that there is, of course, the we haven't actually seen any responses to this from countries that have earlier expressed. So, for instance, UAE has expressed a desire to trade in the rupee earlier. Iran has, and in fact has tried also, but RBI kept beating them on the foot every time they tried to do anything with the rupee, which was a pain in the neck. So that's why they said, "नहीं नहीं बस बहुत हो गया." There is Russia now, perhaps a lot of the smaller countries also, but it will take 10 to 15 years for the rupee to even become anywhere close to significant. But you have to start somewhere. So at least this is the starting somewhere bit. I don't think I expect miracles कि कल से मतलब सब कुछ इंडियन INR में ट्रेड होने लग जाएगा, वो तो होगा ही नहीं. Everything in this macroeconomic world में 10 years is a very, it's like tomorrow. So I think we should be very cognizant कि कल को announcement नहीं हो रहा है. In 6 months there will be an obituary also written. अरे इतना सारा ड्रामा किया, रुपी को इंटरनेशनल कोई भी नहीं आया, कुछ नहीं आएगा ना, टाइम लगेगा उसको. थोड़ा थोड़ा धीरे धीरे से मनाना पड़ेगा बैंक्स को कि हमारा सिस्टम भी ठीक है, आप प्लीज आ जाओ, वी विल मेक श्योर योर स्टफ इज सेफ, वी वोंट डू रैंडम थिंग्स लाइक यूएस डज कि आपका अकाउंट फ्रीज कर दिया. वो सब ट्रस्ट बनाने को वी हैव टू बिल्ड सम टाइम. हम लोग तो वैसे ही फ्रीज कर देते हैं अकाउंट्स, तो मतलब क्यों नहीं फ्रीज करेंगे? बिकॉज दैट दिस इंडिया हैज डन ऑल इट्स ड्रामा अर्लियर आल्सो, सो वी हैव टू कन्विंस द वर्ल्ड. इट विल टेक सम टाइम. If you want to invite, I think there's another request. Let me just quickly ask.
Yep. Deepak.
Oh, there are 16.
Yeah. So Deepak, there is a question. I just got it in DM. So there's a question which is a kind of a thought where where some if something against say a dollar or euro has to survive. So should that be something in which a group of countries come together and have a currency to trade? Would that be a better thing to or rather than different countries taking different routes and doing this through their own currency?
So, if countries come together to trade, only one meaning has to be there, where countries agree that there will be a common currency. Otherwise, you have to convert from this common entity thing into another currency, right? Because otherwise, how will it work? I mean, think about it. I have to pay my rent in rupees. Now I come to Russia and I say we have a common currency, we have a common way to trade with some kind of a block. And then what do we do? Because I have to give the Russian person ruble somehow. So it has to be INR to rubles. It can go through a third party route and then go become rubles, which is what the dollar is. But you can also use, of course, not used in international trade quite as much, but you could use, let us say, a predefined combination of thoda sa ruble, thoda sa Chinese yuan, thoda sa this, and then that combination price will obviously vary with the market price of each of these countries with each other, right? So uh, it becomes just more complicated. It's better to do one is to one. It's just easier and everybody understands it. This idea of using a common thing, unless everybody agrees that common currency hoga, nahi, matlab nahi to how does it, uh,
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. So as well, you need a euro for that, I think. So
Yeah.
I'll now open it up for Gurmeet Sahani to share their question or comments. You can unmute yourself and speak. While we wait for Gurmeet, anybody else who have any comments or questions, just you can push the request button at the bottom left of your screen, and we'll take it up.
There seems to be some problem. I see 17 requests, but I can't see them anywhere. Oh.
Okay, I'm also not seeing any requests. So there is a question in my DM, which is again a quick question. So would this move impact IT exports, or rather, if I make this very broader, would this impact any sectors or industries uh, immediately or in the long term?
Immediately, though, I guess not, because immediately ka matlab some Russian bank. Okay, firstly, let us say some Russian bank says that it wants to create a correspondent account here. The Indian bank has to say, "Ki boss, I have to go to RBI and say I want to create this particular account for the Russian bank." RBI has to say okay. RBI has to then do all the drama. This thing. Now remember, you can't use SWIFT, so you have to use a different messaging system which the RBI is going to be comfortable with to say ki this trade has actually happened, because otherwise trades may be denied, right? So people want a reliable system to mention that a trade is happening, and the trade does not just happen saying that I pay money, you send goods. Usually there will be some kind of a bank guaranteeing system right in the middle. So then a letter of credit is opened. There is a bank guarantee that says, "Oh, if he doesn't pay, I will pay." That kind of stuff that ensures that the trust is retained between both countries. SWIFT has generated this trust over a long period of time. So when somebody sends a SWIFT message saying, "Yes, I'm done," everybody agrees that yes, that agreement of having been done stands and will stand some court and all that stuff, which is how that that system has been built. Now, India and Russia and China have systems, trade settlement systems that come close. And Russia, I think, has a much more advanced trade settlement system already in place. So we'll have to make sure we understand and kind of get with that program as well. So I don't think it'll immediately start changing things. However, I do believe that some progress will happen along these lines, at least for Russia, because we've been importing oil from Russia. How are we paying them? We might be paying them right now through Gazprom, because Gazprom is allowed as a bank. Gazprom Bank is allowed to receive and send USD because it's a special exception, because otherwise Russia will die. I mean, Russia will cut off the gas in Germany and Germany will die. So this exception continues to exist right now, but obviously Russia needs to plan for when this exception may no longer be available even for a Gazprom bank. And even Gazprom's dollars or euros may be seized or freezed. This, I think, um, this is why we might see the first thing coming in from a Russia or from an Iran. But I do believe that for every other country also, it should be uh, an interesting thing to work with the INR, especially if they have a lot of trade with India. Um, uh, right now, I can't say which. I mean, I can only think of the Russian companies. So I'm sure Reddy's, for instance, has some trade with Russia. Reliance is trading with Russia. These might be companies that might be directly impacted if Russian banks are the first ones to grab this opportunity and RBI were to allow them.
Okay. So Deepak, there are a lot of people trying to request
Yeah,
to
I don't know what's
participate, but
happening.
we are not getting requests. So then I'm getting questions on my DM. So I'll take one of those questions. So the question is, what impact would this have on the export benefits available to exporters under say foreign trade policy or GST? Because currently the benefits are only available if payments are received in foreign currency.
हाँ,
So
they'll have to change the rules. वो सब बहुत कुछ change करना पड़ेगा, because the idea of the payment being received in foreign currency should no longer apply, because it's export is export. How does it matter if you're paid in rupees? uh, if you're actually getting paid in rupees, you don't need that many dollars, no. So that technically, you keep the dollars as an import hedge. If the import itself is denominated in rupees, you don't need the import hedge. So, therefore, they should be changing these rules to say exports denominated in whichever currency is fine.
right. There is one more question. So the question is, what is the incentive for non-Russian company to use this route? There is already INR invoicing mechanism and Vostro settlement is already there. So what has materially changed?
Offshore settlement. I mean, I don't know if it was onshore, because I think offshore settlement systems were all offshore, right? Because otherwise, why would they even create these rules of this? Because technically, banks can have they have offshore and offshore accounts, but I don't know if this was allowed for trade settlement at all in the past. Perhaps it's allowed for. So, for instance, the way that an American bank might have done some trading in India is it'll have an Indian account from an Indian branch. And the American account would be there. So they would use their Indian branch to facilitate transfers into India from American organizations and then use them for different purposes. But I think this just allows for a much more international system. Of course, I don't know. Maybe there are alternatives that exist, and I don't think that this is the first time it's been tried. At all, that we've had systems where I think the UAE was the deal was made in 2018 that they will denominate trade flows in with between the two countries in USD in the first place. in INR in the first place, but even that did not take off in any meaningful way. Plus, the UAE anyway is pegged to the dollar, but let them peg to the dollar. No, we then can peg to the rupee between the two of us. They have to deal with the dollar-based uh, issues. But uh, effectively, I think this is an interesting step uh, forward. But I mean, like I said, it's just step one. We need step two, step three before the rupee becomes international. The better thing that I mean, the other part is of course people who are exporting, if they're expecting to get foreign exchange and therefore all the uh, benefits because they have imported in foreign exchange, those rules will have to be changed, and those rules may not be in the hands of the RBI at all.
Okay, Deepak, there are 1,400 people on the spaces right now, and my DM. Let's do style if you have the time, of course. So
Sure, sure. I'm all.
yeah. So this question is very intuitive because the question from Sankalp is that will the banks now suffer considering their FX conversion revenue will get hit?
यार ये तो बहुत दूर की बात है यार. अभी तो 6 महीने में एक कंट्री का एक बैंक खुल जाए ना, आई विल बी वेरी हैप्पी. इसमें फॉरेक्स कन्वर्जन रेवेन्यू, इट्स लाइक सेइंग यार व्हेन द चाइल्ड इज बॉर्न यू वांट टू फिगर आउट कितने मार्क्स 10th स्टैंडर्ड में कौन से सब्जेक्ट में आएंगे. आने तो दो. मतलब banks will find a way to pick your pocket. Banks are very good at it. If they can't earn money on forex fees, they will earn money somewhere else. It's not like they were born yesterday. इससे कुछ नहीं होने वाला in terms of जल्दी जल्दी से. But definitely I think longer term there will be a change in fee structures. So the fee structure the banks may earn from the correspondent bank fee structure. So for instance, when you make a transfer to an American entity through a bank in the middle in America, that middle bank also earns some money ना. ऐसी फोकट में थोड़ी काम करेगा वो. He will do something. So what they used to earn in forex uh, transaction fees of 0.2 0.3%, they will earn in larger volumes because now they're correspondent bank with a smaller percentage. You know, maybe earning 0.01%, but of 100x the volume. So banks will earn anyways. I think banks will make money regardless. They'll just have much more business to do. Just scale of business is more. Your margins may be smaller, scales are higher.
Right. Moving on. So this question is an amalgamation of two questions. So the question is that what is the reason that India never did this thing in the past and it didn't do this earlier? So now this is a speculative part of it. That is this done through a trigger of the Russia-Ukraine war, or is it due to the situation we are seeing in Sri Lanka due to a lot of dollar debt? So India, of course, wants to continue its business with Russia. So is that the reason that India has opened this up right now?
Okay, one thing is they're two very, very different things. First, don't compare us to Sri Lanka. We are way better shape than Sri Lanka. We were in bad shape perhaps at one point. We were probably where they are now. We were in 1992 and we hadn't defaulted. We were close to it. We didn't default that time. Sri Lanka has. Sri Lanka has done. Sri Lanka is way behind in that aspect. Okay, so we're not. I don't think Sri Lanka comes into this whole aspect of things. But why haven't we done this earlier? This is a question I want to ask also. I think I first wrote my first article about it was 2011, and I was probably the last person in the world at that time to write about something like this because so many people had written about it before, saying, "Why don't we do this?" It's not such a big deal to have done it, but just that they didn't do it, and everybody said, "We're not ready. We're not ready." Rajiv Gandhi at some point in time in 1980 something, at some point had said India is not ready for a free press. Okay, so there was a fantastic book called Sorry Not Ready by I think Anil Dharkar. Very nice book about how the media evolved at that time. This concept of not ready is just like everybody is just becoming our father and our parents and all that stuff. For what reason? I think if we have to suffer, let us suffer. No, why do you want to suddenly take theka that we are not ready for this? It's done. We were ready 10 years ago. I'm finally happy that something is happening, but it's not yet enough. I think more has to be done. I want to commend them for at least allowing this to happen. The next step has to be to please repeal FEMA and bring a slightly lesser onerous act in foreign exchange management so that not everybody is a criminal. Right now, everybody is a criminal, no matter how you look at it. So, hopefully that will also happen. But one step at a time. कुछ तो हो रहा है मतलब happy that that's happening at least. Can you hear me? Am I still audible? I think Nate may have gone off or that, or I have gone off. Oh, I see a request. Sharad Bhai is here. Sharad Bhai, if you're on, if you can listen to me, if I am still here, could you go ahead?
Hello.
Hi, Sharad Bhai, can you hear me?
Yeah. Uh, 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 in this balance of payment
We can hear you,
was
Deepak.
a business of $100 billion. Okay, 65 import and 35 exports. Now, generally it is crude oil, gold, electronic IT services, and textiles, and something else I forgot. Jewelry. Now everything is dollar denominated. Now I don't know how much is our import and export of Russia. How much is?
I don't right now know. I'm sure I'll have that number, some 50, some X billion dollars, let's say. Right now it's increased, no? Last, we are doing some what? 1.2 million barrels per day.
Mm.
So $100
No,
per.
this is an accepted time. So this function or this memo or this rule is only to circumvent the problems of Russia. It's nothing to do with us. We will be truly global if we allow uh, convertibility on our capital account, which is not happening since child. So, okay, ठीक है, रशिया को फायदा होगा और अपना पॉलिटिकली जो नुकसान होगा ये यूएस से रिपरकशंस आएगा, अब पक्का आएगा. So that's that. And Deepak, unrelated question I wanted to ask you. Suppose our deficit is $20 billion. So in a month and in a year it will be 200 billion. So how do we
That is trade
finance it?
deficit, no?
Yeah. How do we finance it? From remittances.
No, it's remittances, services, FDI, FI. So, uh,
Services
your
are included
all
in this. No, services are included in that deficit.
no services 20 billion is the merchandise deficit. Services deficit net is much lower. So, for instance, January to March quarter, which we have the revenue, we have the deficit for full quarter. The total deficit in India is $13 billion. That is for
Oh,
3 months put together, it was 13 billion current account deficit. So
okay.
it is not 20 billion per month. वो merchandise है.
Ah, okay. So I get it. So we are comfortable then on the resource.
On the sorry.
On the resource side, we are
हाँ.
comfortable. And lastly,
Reasonably, we. हाँ,
नहीं आप बोलिए
sorry, sorry. Good.
नहीं
नहीं, मैं
नहीं
बोला
आप
reasonably comfortable, but अभी है उसमें fight थोड़ा सा, but
एंड वो जो ये आरबीआई का बोल ही ना था कि 5% चांस है कि देयर वुड बी एन आउटफ्लो ऑफ 80 billion, 100 billion. What was all that about?
I
Why are
don't know. I think
they why are they warning us?
वो तो 80 billion, 100 billion तो not a problem, no, because you have 650. It's already 18 billion has gone. So I think 600 at one point or 680 billion, including the forward contracts that they had, and now it is 583 or 587 or something like that. But that's not including forwards. Forwards में और 40 billion है, so they have already seen 50-60 billion go out. See, this is also why the RBI balance sheet has fallen. There used to be 5 to 7 lakh crores extra excess reserves by banks that was parked in reverse repo. Now, RBI has sold, say, 60-70 billion dollars. That is probably around 400,000 plus crores. 400,000 crores has come down from the RBI balance sheet. Therefore, the excess reserves also, which banks were parking extra, yesterday was only 2.5 lakh crores versus 7.5 lakh crores about 8 or 9 months ago. So it's time may that much money has gone out of the Indian system, and luckily we are in a massive surplus in the liquidity side, which is why we have not felt it too badly. They might lose more, I don't know. I mean, we'll see how if it ever switches, how things happen. But uh, in all probability, the RBI can choose not to get rid of the reserves and let the rupee depreciate instead. On the other hand, it has started to do things like this liberalization of flows for allowing FCNR deposits with higher interest rates and all that. All of those things they are trying to do to attract more relatively short-term flows, but to balance out the currency outflows. So I'm not sure if that is the only reason why it is happening. I think there are more steps coming. They done 4 or 5 steps last week. One step was FCNR deposits by banks were limited to a certain percentage and all that stuff. That limits have been removed for the next 3 or 4 months. Second, NRE deposits in dollars don't have SLR and CRR. That's effectively some 25-26% that goes off. But there is another thing called a liquidity coverage ratio, LCR. So I don't know if they had eliminated that also from this thing. I think they only mentioned CRR and SLR. So the LCR might still apply, in which case you still need to use buy government bonds with that liquid cash. So that was one thing. But they'd also mentioned, I mean, they'd done some short-term things, like for instance, foreign foreign investors are not allowed to buy local uh, like government bonds which are maturing less than 3 years from the time they buy. That is residual maturity of less than 3 years. This was not allowed unless you park. You could only do 30% in short term. You have to do 70% in long term. Now, most foreign flows, they don't want to invest in 3 or 5 year paper in India. Most of the carry trade happens only because you can do short term paper on both sides. So now they have said, okay, let's allow that short term flow to happen, but only allow it for the next 3 or 4 months so that it stabilizes any potential in outflows. That has not happened. So rupee went to 79.40 today. Apparently, it's trading at below 78. I am not sure. But I think Srini, you just mentioned that, right? I think let's break the stage also at this stage, if you're here. I think Srini was here. Let me just invite you. So I didn't know that the rupee had fallen so much. I'm sorry, I was so writing articles and all that. I didn't see the rupee exchange rate. But that uh, flow of USD to India might stabilize things somewhat as well. And the fact that the demand for USD may be slightly lesser if other countries choose to trade in the rupee. Now, much as I say this, I think we should take a lot of the nationalistic fervor about this with a pinch of salt, because just because a rule something has been opened doesn't mean if you open the gate does not mean everybody will jump in at the same time. Everybody is going to stand outside and wait कि कल हम लोग अंदर आएंगे तो दरवाजा बंद कर देंगे क्या type thing. So we have to build that trust also internationally before anybody does this. Let's see how the reaction goes. It's 10:30, so I'm not sure if. I'm sorry, there are lots of requests to speak. I can see these things, but when I look at approval numbers, I don't see anybody in the approval queue. So I don't understand this at all. Let me. Okay. Okay. For now, let me just do the end part. Nakul, you're here. Are you? Do you want to take the stage?
Hey, Deepak. I just joined late, so I'm not sure if you already covered this. But as an exporter, what is the reason that somebody would shift to the rupee? Dropping rupee is helpful, right?
Oh yeah, but a rising one is not. See, other problem with the rupee with denoting trade in the USD is, let's say today you're an exporter, you have salaries to pay locally in INR. So let us say you have 10 employees, you have 10 lakh rupees per year cost per employee. So you have to generate revenues of 1 crore rupees in rupee terms in order to meet that, plus maybe a profit margin of say 30-35%. Let us assume that you had to make 1.5 crores. Now you said rupee is at 75. Let me bill my customers $200,000. I will make 1.5 crores. I'll pay 1 crore in salaries, another little bit in expenses, and I'll have a bunch, 20-30 lakhs left as profit. This is how you're thinking. Now, the way that this might work is, you might say, I'll go and sell the dollar forward, which is at say 76 rupees 50 paisa or something like that. And I'll try and get revenues that are uh, that I can hedge those revenues out. Of course, you can't hedge the whole thing because the revenues may not be exactly perfect, but you'll hedge some part of it. If the rupee goes to 79, now you're miserable because now you hedged it 76, it's a 79, you lost that 3 rupees extra, and your competition is getting the 3 rupees extra, so they have reduced costs, and now you're not even earning the $200,000 in the first place. So you decide not to hedge. If you don't hedge, now the rupee goes to 71. Now you've lost almost all of your profit margin, or a reasonable part of your profit margin, because you didn't hedge. So you're thinking of whether to hedge, whether to not hedge. If you hedge,
Theoretically, I
there's a
agree,
problem.
Deepak, but when was the last time it gained?
Oh, it gained very. So there have been lots of reasonable 1 year periods where the rupee has gained substantially. I think once in 2013 it went to 68 rupees. Within a year and a half after that, it was at 55 or 56. That's a 20% jump, right? So, or a 15% jump in the rupee, and then it went back to 70s. I mean, it went back up, and then when it first crossed 70, then it went back to 65 or 66, and then went to 70. In fact, very recently it was at 76, went back to 72 or something like that, which is again a 5 or 6% jump. So it does fluctuate, but you have to pay your people every month. You can't say, boss, wait, no, 2 months, rupee will depreciate again. So you have to take those rupee hits as they come. So even if there's a 6 month period when the rupee has appreciated 10%, and the rupee will go down back again, let us say, just for the argument's sake, those 6 months can cause considerable strain on finances of an exporter. If he's chosen to hedge in one direction, it may hurt him, and if he has not chosen to hedge, it may hurt him in the other direction. So all of these things just add stress, and then you don't have the financial instruments, also the depth of the financial instruments today, to be able to hedge properly. So you before this there were a lot of fundas also on how much you could hedge at what point and all that. Now a lot of those fundas have been removed, but I would say dealing with the INR just reduces this exchange rate risk in low margin exports. So if you're exporting something at a 6% or 5% margin, a very tiny move in the rupee can completely crush you. Uh, which is why a lot of people who export in the textiles area, for instance, all the money they make is from the rebates, because the currency ups and downs pretty much kill their margins. And if the government gives them a rebate on exports, that is how they earn almost all of their profit. So, so you might be able to eliminate all of that. And
Got
therefore,
it. Deepak, I'm digressing a bit, but does it then make sense to look towards a fully convertible currency?
oh, then no. I mean, always. We should have always been trying to be a fully convertible currency. Um, the fear seems to be कि यार fully convertible, then everybody will take their money and run. Well, let them know. I mean, what will happen? The rupee, you will need more and more rupees if people actually rush to do this, to be able to buy a dollar, because people will rush and do this. Uh, I think the other side will happen. If it becomes fully convertible, more money will come in than go out. So here is I mean, this is the funda of basically saying, if you can't fire people, you will not hire people. If there's a rule that says you cannot fire anybody, you will not hire them also. So it will be like, boss, if I can't fire them, what's the point? I won't run the business only. So if you give freedoms, more interesting things will happen than if you don't have the freedom in the first place. So freeing a rupee, making it fully capital account convertible account to me, will make the rupee more interesting to be invested in. So therefore, it will likely bring more inflows than outflows. But then, I mean, I'm just making a conjecture, but we don't have any proof to say it. But I think, yes, it's time for us to be fully convertible. Any step in that direction, literally any, even a baby step in that direction is good, because in my lifetime I hope to see that the rupee is at some point convertible. I wrote about it first 10 years ago. I hope before I lose all my hair, the next step happens. So I'm just speaking very frustrated fellow I am otherwise.
Thanks, Deepak.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
Are we still connected in the space or it's gone all mute?
Oh, sorry. I think I was speaking. I'm so sorry. I think my thing went on mute. So I guess we'll terminate the space. Thanks, Sushil, for bringing that back on. I didn't realize I
Deepak,
was on
quick,
mute.
quick 2 points.
Yes, sir.
Just imagine a scenario. Say Trafigura Commodities, which is just one of the one-third arms of the erstwhile Mark Rich commodities that controlled the world's commodity trading. The Russian collapse is also attributed to him. Clinton gave a pardon to his 275 years of imprisonment sentence 5 minutes before becoming a dodo in his second presidential term. Last 10 years, Trafigura Commodities has a football field-sized, quiet trading room in Bombay. And the other two offshoots from Mark Rich are also, other two names. Let me not go into the semantics. They are also having those football-sized trading rooms here. And now you have an Olam Commodities and so many others who are doing global commodity trading. Tomorrow, Reliance jumps into just purely doing trading, or an ONGC does it. Just a scenario I'm imagining. Buy the Russian crude in rupee terms, and anybody else in the world who has a problem in dealing with Russian crude in dollar terms finds this conduit. So a hyperactivity in rupee is possible, and the way this government has been moving around with a bit of swag on the global landscape, I would be very carefully watching the space over the next 2 to 4 weeks. Doesn't things don't handle at a random timing. So it is not just one assertion of the growing expression of Indian government's confidence in things, but the timing of how the world trade is currently juxtaposed, and the way pure contractual trading firms are around, and they are very much present in Bombay in big scale and size and balance sheet. So very interesting days ahead, and just not only from a trivial point of view that a small merchant like Kedianomics was paying too much for its NRI clients who were to first pay in dollars to Razor Pay, and that Razor Pay was making too much money. That small gain will be digested quickly, and that's fine. But I think there are going to be very, very big impacts on the geopolitical front, and and a big risk has been clearly and openly taken by the Indian administration. Risk by its nature can create very large moves in the fortunes, and those fortunes this time around are definitely the tussle of nations. So I find this move of today not a usual sub headline, but this may continue to grab much more and much bigger powerful headlines over the next fortnights.
Very true, Sushil. I think conjecture is good. Let's see how things pan out on the ground. Um, Good points about things changing and bringing in more clarity, and of course us taking pangas effectively with the West. But अब क्या है? I just want to make one point. We are not doing this with a swagger. We are doing this with our backs to the wall. We have to do this, otherwise we were going to be in very bad shape. The RBI does not take such actions lightly, and it is probably taking this action in a sort of desperate phase where it feels that things are going to get much worse, and therefore they better act now before it gets too late. They have taken baby steps, but at least they have taken some steps. So on that front, I think been a wonderful call. I'm sorry for all the drama in the beginning where I did about 1 hour of talking, I think, just to myself. But I'm so sorry about that part. But I hope this has been informative for everyone. I really hope we'll get more clarity as we go along. I just thought I'll do a quick call to just see the kind and just explain what my thoughts were. I may be horribly wrong and I've got this completely off the whack. So, I mean, we'll find out tomorrow. But this is going to be quite interesting about how the rupee opens up tomorrow. All bets are off right now. I am not, I have no positions on the rupee, but I do have positions in companies that benefit or don't benefit from massive rupee appreciation. So it will be quite interesting to see how even they react and they comment over the next few days. Meanwhile, let's wait. I think this is a good step. I have been waiting for some of this for a long time. I'll leave you with this thought. So, thanks very much for listening and have a good evening and whatever's left, rest for the night. Thanks, everyone. Okay, coming back to the summary, we are RBI has just freed the rupee in a small way. They have allowed the internationalization of the rupee in the sense that trade flows can be settled in the rupee. All this sounds very good, but right now, let me just quickly summarize what's currently happened. If you trade with someone in US dollar, which is um, if I'm buying something from Amazon in the US, I have to tell my bank, which is say HDFC Bank, to contact to pay Amazon. Now, how does HDFC Bank pay Amazon? HDFC Bank has a correspondent account. It's called a Vostro account inside some bank in the US, let's say JP Morgan. And for the sake of simplicity, let's say JP Morgan is also where Amazon is banking itself. Now, Amazon has an account there, HDFC Bank has an account there. Both these accounts are denominated in USD. What happens here is that I tell my bank, listen, pay $100,000 to Amazon. HDFC Bank says, Acha, theek hai, but you have to give me 80 lakh rupees because 80 rupees exchange rate and with their fees and all that drama, which is why HDFC Bank makes so much money. But they take the 80 lakhs from say my account and then gives $100,000. How does it give that? It says, well, JP Morgan Chase, it calls JP Morgan Chase up. Actually, it sends a swift message, but just to give you the indication, it calls JP Morgan Chase up and says, मेरे अकाउंट में $100,000 है, उसको निकाल के प्लीज Amazon के अकाउंट में डाल दो in appropriate language, right? So you move. So HDFC's USD account inside of JP Morgan Chase is debited and Amazon's account is credited with USD. This is how international trade happens currently. This also happens if the USD trade is done between two people who are not even in the US. So India is trading with Russia. India wants to buy, say, I don't know, diamonds from Russia. If it wants to buy those diamonds from Russia, the Russian bank, the Russian diamond exporter has a Russian bank. Indian diamond importer has an Indian bank. Both these banks have Vostro accounts in some US banks. Some, let's assume again for the sake of simplicity, both of them have it with the same JP Morgan Chase Bank in New York. Both of those, so the Indian importer pays the Indian bank in rupees. Indian bank tells its Vostro account tells JP Morgan Chase to debit its Vostro account, transfer money to the Russian bank's Vostro account in JP Morgan Chase US itself. Therefore, and then the Russian bank pays appropriate rubles to the Russian Russian importer, rather Russian exporter. So the dollars remain in the JP Morgan Chase accounts in New York. They never leave there, but that's the idea. USD can only be traded inside the US. It always remains in the US. INR remains in INR. Russia rubles remain in Russia. Now, what happens with this is that the situation would generally work fine, except for now, where they have frozen the USD accounts of Russian banks, the Vostro accounts inside the US, almost all except for Gazprom. We'll come to that later. But the Russian accounts being frozen means that India can't pay for anything in USD or Europe also, because Europe also has such sanctions, to any Russian exporter. And similarly, a Russian importer can't use, or Russian bank cannot use its accounts to pay for any imports by Russia from a US or European counterparty. This is a problem because at some level, it's like you having um, you know, if say HDFC Bank's net banking doesn't work, and you have a lot of money in HDFC, it's only in HDFC Bank. What do you do then? Because if the net banking doesn't work, you may have all this money, but you can't use it. And if they continuously keep throwing errors, you can never use that money, right? So you feel miserable and you feel poor, and then you go and say, "कि इसको तो कुछ hedge करना है यार." Yeah, go and open an account with ICICI Bank, put half your money in one bank, half you put in another bank. So you hope that both of them don't go down at the same time, and definitely not purposely. So here, purposefully, Russia's money has been blocked by US and Europe. So they can't trade, and now obviously they are looking for other currencies to trade with, and they've already been trading with China in the yuan. India, US, Europe, yuan bhi karenge, and then we're fighting some war with them and all that. It's a fight. The second one is that India is a net importer on trade for the most part. So therefore, we should if you take two countries and one is an exporter and one is an importer, the country that exports provides the goods, country that imports should provide the currency in general. This is overly simplistic, but in general, that's the thing. See, India being a net importer, the rupee should be used. It's the only net importer in the BRIC. So it makes sense for the rupee to be more international in nature. However, India is not very um, popular in the international circles, whether it is for lots of reasons. We have arbitrarily set rules, all sorts of things.